Assalamu alaikum students, this is your teacher Anam Qadri, and today I have come up with the topic of explanation of while loops, how they are used, in which conditions they are used, and what do they actually do. While loops are actually known as pre-tested iterations or as condition controlled loop, in which we can say that while loops are basically those control structures that repeats a sequence of statements as long as a specified condition is evaluated as true, because the check happens before entering the loop body. That is why it is known as a pre-condition loop. That is, it is first going to check the condition. If the condition is true, then only it will enter the loop. As you can see here in the flow chart, the while loop starts, but as soon as it starts, it enters into the decision making structure, in which that condition is first tested. If on testing the condition this is true, then only it will move on to the execution of the instructions that follow the while loop. Whereas if this condition is false, then it won't enter into the loop. In fact, it will straight away be terminated and moved on to the next part of the program. What are the core characteristics of the while loop? First of all, it is perfect for scenarios where you do not know in advance how many times the loop will need to be executed before completion. For example, if we are running the loop for as many times as the number that is input is not 2, then that means that a user can enter the second number as 2 and come out of the loop, or the user can enter 10 numbers before entering 2 and coming out of the loop, or the user can even enter 1000 numbers before entering 2 to come out of the loop. So since in the conditions where we do not know that how many times the loop is going to run, but it will entirely depend upon the condition that is specified to it for the exit, then we will use the while loop. Secondly, it is condition driven, as I already mentioned earlier, and this condition is mostly represented using the logical expressions or using the relational expressions. It totally depends upon what the condition is. And thirdly, if the test condition initially fails, execution bypasses the while control block completely, protecting the code integrity from bad starting values. So in this way, it's going to secure the code inside the while loop as well. Let's see the basic syntax of the while loop. The basic syntax include the keyword while, followed by the condition, then by the keyword do. And after do, all the series of those instructions that are part of the while loop. These can be one or many. And in the end, the loop is terminated by the keyword end while. So as long as the end while is not the cursor or the processor does not move to the end while, that means it is running within the loop. Let's consider this example where the value of count is started from the value 0. Let's take the value of count as 0, initialized as 0, and as long as the while loop is running, it's going to print the value of count until the count value reaches 10. As soon as the value reaches 10, it is going to come out of the loop. So let's run this program for once. Initially, the value of count is 0, so it will move to the next line where it will look at the condition. The condition says count should be less than 10. Yes, count is less than 10. Therefore, it is going to output the value of count to 0 and then move on to the next line, which is count plus 1. That means now the value of count is 1. It again moves from here to this condition where it is going to see whether 1 is lesser than 10. Yes, 1 is lesser than 10, the condition is true. So it will output the value 1 and move on to the next line. The value of count is 2. Again, it will check the condition 2 is less than 10. Yes, it will output the value 2. Increment it to 3. Test the condition 3. Increment it again. Test the condition 4. Increment it again. Test the condition 5 is lesser than 10. Increment it 6, it's less than 10. Output. Increment it 7, it's less than 10. Output. Increment it 8, it's less than 10. Output. Increment it 9, it's less than 10. Output. Increment it to 10. Now when on 10 it moves back to the condition. Count is no more less than 10, but it is equal to 10. Since this condition will be false now, so it will move directly from the while loop to the end while without going inside the loop. And hence in this way it is going to come out of the loop. Now let's consider if we have to make the flowchart for this program. We will begin with start, move on to initializing the value of count first. So we are going to integrate it within the rectangle. Count is equals to 0. And then after count it's equals to 0, since it is going to test, therefore the while loop is entered and we are going to enter the test value. Count is less than 10. If this is true, then what to do? Output count. So we are going to enclose it within the parallelogram. Output count, and after this we have to increment the value of count. So we are going to use it within the rectangle since this is the process that is to be done. Count is count plus 1, and after incrementing it will again test the condition. So from here we are going to take it back to this arrow where it is going to test it. But if it is false, then in that condition it will come out of the loop simply. So we are going to exit it. So in this way, this is the pseudocode representation, this is the flowchart representation, and this is the output of the while loop that is being used here. Since we are talking about the loop, so there is always a likelihood that an error might occur and it might move into an infinite loop. An infinite loop trap is one in which it will go on looping and giving the output without, or will move within the loop without giving the output even, and it would be hard to terminate the program this way. So in order to prevent a program from hanging permanently, the condition must eventually evaluate to false. The variable checked in the loop condition, the loop control variable, must always be updated inside the loop body. Failing to update the LCV results in an infinite loop. For example, in the previous example, while we were using while count is less than 10 do, and we were outputting the value of count, right? And initially it was initialized to 0. If we would have missed out the increment operator after this, that was actually count is count plus 1, and in fact we would have directly used and while here, then what would have happened, since the value of count is 0 and it is not changing inside the loop as well, and 0 is always less than 10, then that means it is going to output a series of count and will show on the screen the loop condition without getting terminated. Means it will go on showing a series of zeros on the screen, like as if it has actually the screen as has hung. So in order to come out of this loop, there has to be a condition that is needed to change this value of count, so that while this is true, there is some value of the variable that makes it false as well. And once this is false, then only it will come out of the loop and it will terminate the loop. That is why we have introduced the statement of count is count plus 1 within the loop, so that every time it gets incremented, and eventually there will be a time when the value of count will be such that this true condition would be termed as false, and then it will be easier for this program to be terminated. Let's see how the questions of while loop are incorporated in the past papers. Question number 1, state why a while loop is used in algorithms instead of a for loop. So the standard marking scheme answer says that using a for loop when the exact number of iterations is known before executing, use a while loop when the iteration count is unknown and execution depends purely on the user input or a specific state condition. This is the complete answer that will be expected in terms of this question. Let's consider this example of while loop in which a series of numbers are entered by the user until the number entered is not equal to -1, and then the total of all the numbers that are entered by the user are taken or calculated. So let's start from the first line. The first line states that total will be assigned the value 0. Look at the trace table here. At the start, the value of total is taken as 0. Now we move on to the next line. The next line states that the input value is taken and it is assigned to the variable num. So as soon as the input is is taken by the user enters 3, which is then saved in the variable num. And after this it will move to the next line, which is while num is not equals to 1. So it will check the condition first, whether num is not equals to -1. Yes, num is 3. It is not equals to -1. That means the condition is true. If the condition is true, then it will move inside the loop. It will give the total, the value 0 plus 3 is 3. So now the total variable holds the value 3, and it will move to the next line, which is input num. The user this time enters 5. On entering 5, it will again go back to the condition, check whether it is not equals to -1. The condition is true, so it will move on to the next line after do, which is total plus num. So previously total had the value 3, whereas now the value that is entered is 5. So 3 is added to 5 and the value of total is 8. It then move on to the next line, taking input num. This time the user enters 2. On entering 2, it will again move to the condition, check whether 2 is not equals to 1. Yes, the condition is true. And on being true, it will then move on to the next line, that is total, which holds the value 8 previously. 2 will be added to total, 8, and the value of total is now 10. And this time it moves to the next line again. This time the user enters -1. When the user enters -1, it will go back to the condition. The condition num is now equals to -1. That is, now this condition is false. When this condition is false, instead of going to the statements following the do statement, it will directly move on to end while. And after end while, it is going to find out what to do next. It has to output the value total. So on termination, it is going to simply output the value 10, because this was the last value that was present in the variable total. In paper 2, you are frequently asked to validate values using a while structure to repeatedly prompt users who type invalid data. So let's take an example. For example, there is a program that is taking the score, but the score should range between 0 and 100. and it shouldn't be below 0, neither it should be above 100. So in order to use while loop as validation, there are a few statements that need to be written apart from while loop as well. First, you will have to take the input score and then use the while statement. Because if the score is lesser than 0, it will then move to the while loop, check if the score is lesser than 0 or the score is greater than 100. Means it is going to check both of these conditions. The score should be lesser than 0 or it should be greater than 100 to give the error statement. If either of them is true, then only it will move inside the loop, and it will first generate an output statement saying error, re-enter, and it will give the user the leverage to enter the score again. Now again, if the score entered is greater than 100 or lesser than 0, on on checking this condition, the condition is still true, it will again generate the error. So it will repeat itself until the score entered by the user is between 0 and 100. Only when it is between 0 and 100, then only this while loop will turn false and it will come out of the loop. Let's take an example. For example, the first time the user entered the score, it is -1. It will move to the while loop. It will see score is lesser than 0. Yes, -1 is lesser than 0. So it will, that means the condition is true, because the or for or statement, either of these conditions is true, they will be termed as true. So it will move on to the next line in which it will generate the output error, re-enter 0 to 100. This time it will ask for the score, and the score now entered, for example, is 101. It will again check the condition. Score is lesser than 0? No. Score is greater than 100? Yes. Since this is a yes, that means due to or, this whole condition is true. So it is again going to go inside the loop, write down error, re-enter 0 to 100, and will give the option to the user to enter the score again. This time, if I entered the score 80, it is going to look at the condition. 80 is lesser than 0? No. 80 is greater than 100? No. Since both of them are false, that means this entire condition is false, and it will come out of the loop. So in this way, the data validation will become easier for the user. Let's consider another example for the use of the while loop. This is an example from the past paper. Write an algorithm in pseudocode that allows a user to input an unknown number of temperatures. The input process terminates when the user enters 999, so this can be used as a condition. The program should calculate and output the average temperature excluding the 999. So the first thing, obviously, we have to calculate the average, and for average we need the count and total. So we initialize total as 0 and count as 0. Next, we ask the user to enter a temperature or 999 to stop. So we have specified both the conditions if they want to enter the temperature or they want to stop the loop, and hence take an input as the temperature, whatever the user enters. After this, the while loop is used, in which the temperature, if it is not equal to 999, then do total is total plus temp, that is whatever temperature is taken by the user added to the total, and increment it to count plus 1. That means the first temperature has been given by the user. And then enter output next temperature or 999 to stop. That means that output statement that was previously entered was outside the loop statement. So in order to prompt the user to enter the temperature again, you'll have to use the input statement inside the loop as well. So the user will go on entering the temperature until 999 is entered, and as soon as 999 is entered, it will come out of the while loop. Once it comes out of the while loop, now you have the total of all the temperatures that are added and the count of how many temperatures have been added. So if count is greater than 0, that means if more than one time or more than 0 times the temperature has been entered, then only calculate the average. Keep in mind that I told you earlier in this lecture that care should be taken whenever the division has to be done by 0. First of all, validation needs to be done that the number that is taken in denominator is not equal to 0, because then it will loop in an infinite loop or it will give an erroneous value. So for that, you will first have to check that whatever the value is in the denominator is not 0. That is why this if statement is incorporated here. If only it is greater than 0, then the average would be calculated and output on the screen. And if it is equal to 0, then it will be simple output that no temperatures were entered. That is why the value of count is equals to 0. This will be then. Here are the common problems that students do while writing down the while loops. Writing a loop check condition but neglecting to fetch the next input inside the block, thereby locking the program, or which I already told you is an example of infinite loop. Secondly, writing score lesser than 0 and score greater than 100, which is mathematically impossible, completely bypassing validation check. Means you will have to use a perfect logical operator in between. Using AND means that both of them should be true, but there are a few cases when both of them is not true. Alright, so wherever you use a logical operator, be very particular that if the condition is turning false on any one of them being true, then you will use an OR statement in between. But if you need to check both of these to move on to the true condition or the false condition, then only you will use the AND logical operator. And thirdly, by dividing by count at loop exit without checking if count is greater than 0, crashing if the first input was the sentinel value. For example, if the first input, if you have entered the division of the count, if by any value, and the value that is entered is 0, anything divided by 0 can be an infinite and can be infinite, right? So make sure that you first check the value before any such divisions or any such statements are added into your loop. So summarizing the use of the while loop, a checklist has to be maintained for your examination. That should include: does your while loop have an end while? Did you initialize the condition variable before the loop starts? That means is count the value of count or whatever the variable that is used in the while loop initialized by a value, so that for the first time it enters into the while loop. And does the loop body contain a way to change the variable so the loop can actually end and does not enter into the infinite loop? I hope everything about while loops has been clear up till now. See you in the next lecture. Take care. Allah Hafiz.